Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. Breaking right now on the story, a brand new wave has just begun of U.S. strikes. This is night 6 now in a row of this round of targets that are being hit in Iran. CENTCOM has announced that just about an hour ago that is underway. President Trump, as we know, over the past 24 hours is said to be reportedly considering some new bombing targets. Kharg Island, which obviously has been central to all of the discussion. It's a major hub of the oil storage facilities and putting onto shipping that goes through the Strait for Iran. So that is a very core facility for them. Also, there's on the right-hand side of your screen this area that is known as Pickaxe Mountain. It's believed to be a fairly new nuclear facility. Areas might still be under construction, but there's some consideration about disabling that area as well. As we said, round 6 happening right now. CENTCOM has reported that they are striking targets likely along the Strait of Hormuz. That has been really the focus over the last several days. Correspondent Lucas Tomlinson reporting live from Tel Aviv on the very latest. Hi, Lucas.
Good afternoon, Martha. There has not been any Iranian attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz over the past 3 days since President Trump ordered return of major combat operations in the skies over Iran that began last week in response to Iran's previous attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The Trump administration wants to see that strait open to get more ships through there. Here was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in the briefing room a few minutes ago.
President Trump is not going to sit by and allow these active acts of terrorism to take place in the Strait without ensuring Iran pays consequences for that, and that's what we are witnessing right now.
And for the first time since President Trump ordered a resumption of the naval blockade, U.S. forces disabled an oil tanker, firing Hellfire missiles at the stacks, trying to run through it to Iran's Kharg Island. To date, 2 other commercial ships have reversed course and turned away from the blockade, enforced by 20 U.S. warships and hundreds of aircraft. This video from the U.S. military Central Command shows F-18 Super Hornets launching with standard land attack missiles attached with a range of 170 miles. Iran has responded by launching recent attacks against Iraq, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait, and that attack on Iraq coming just 2 days after President Trump met Iraq's new prime minister at the White House. Now, President Trump announcing a dual national American-Iranian woman, Dina Karari, is now free from Iranian captivity after being held since December 2024 on charges of espionage. 6 other Americans remain detained. Her attorney posting the following on X, quote, "This would not have happened but for the extraordinary and relentless efforts of President Donald Trump. Dina is now safe and traveling back to the United States." So while the U.S. military has been launching wave after wave of airstrikes, in fact 3 just yesterday, Iran is now threatening to use its proxy forces in Yemen to close another strait. This is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the entrance to the Red Sea if President Trump follows through on his threats to attack Iranian power plants. Martha.
Lucas, thank you very much. With that, we bring in retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Darin Gaub, former Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander, and Noah Rothman, National Review senior writer. Great to have both of you with us today. Let me start with you, Darin Gaub, if I may. When you look at what, the military objective here, right? So at this point, when we started this in the end of February and really going back to last June in terms of disabling the nuclear program in Iran, that was the main objective. Now the objective has become freedom of the seas in the Strait of Hormuz. And you have obviously a difficult struggle before us. There are ships going back and forth, but this is what Iran had to say. This is number 3 here. This is an Iranian military officer and spokesperson Ibrahim Zalfakhari. "We will not allow the United States to interfere in the Strait. That is our red line. We once again stress that under no circumstances and in no way will we allow the U.S. as a foreign or extra-regional country to interfere in the Strait of Hormuz." And as I said, they are calling that their red line. Where are we here?
Well, Martha, it's already too late. We're interfering in the Strait of Hormuz for a good reason. So what you've seen starting in February was our focus on both the nuclear capability, the ballistic missiles, and all those things that threaten regionally and also would impede our ability to operate freely over top of Iran the best we can, gaining air superiority. Then we move to these periods of somewhat calm with the memorandum of understanding and other negotiations, immediately into now what we've seen for a few days of isolating the Strait and all those things that can threaten the Strait. What has now changed with this most recent wave of airstrikes is moving further inland into Iran as, frankly, you run out of targets along the shorelines of Iran and things that are worthy of being bombed by whatever type of munition we may be using. And this is an expected expansion inland to Iran now. But what it says is that we maintain the air superiority over top of Iran, and we're going to expand this where we need to attain those strategic objectives that, by and large, remain the same.
But let me ask you this, staying with you for just a moment here on the military side of this. In terms of landing on some of these islands and perhaps taking control of some of these islands, Karg Island and the others, Greater and Lesser Taub, that are also on the list. They're obviously in that area between, some of them go up the coast of Iran, but some are right in that area in the Strait of Hormuz. I've spoken with some people who believe that would take a military commitment of several months in order to really commandeer control of the Strait in a military way. And we know that President Trump has said he would consider putting boots on the ground there. What's a time frame that makes sense to you?
I think that's a fair assessment to be able to say somewhere between maybe 4 and 6 months, and 6 months would be definitely at the outside. But of course, what you're doing is you're increasing the risk to our forces by putting them on fixed locations that are well known and easily targeted if Iran maintained the capability to do so. But we have the ability to occupy them. We have the ability to hold them if necessary. And that is not what I would call a major boots on the ground decision. This is a specific, very limited objective if President Trump decides to actually occupy any one or all three of those islands, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, you look through military history, Noah Rothman, and we do have examples where limited military attempts to or have been successful in terms of returning territory. And in this case, you're liberating the Strait of Hormuz, essentially, from Iranian invasion, some might say. What's your take on what's before the president right now and what the challenges are, Noah?
Well, we have precedent, as you said, we have precedent for operations like these. Some involve taking territory to be used, negotiated later as a bargaining chip or a more durable settlement. We have history of liberating the straits from Iranian interference on our own history. In the late 1980s, rather 1987, 1988, we opened up the strait from an Iranian attempt to close it, and subsequent harassment efforts throughout the 40 years since. What the president unfortunately faces is that he's issued these threats many times before. The threats themselves no longer have any kind of deterrent rationale to them. I think he has to actually make good on an operation to, for example, take Karg Island or execute the bridges and power plants day that he threatened even before the ceasefire was in effect. This also goes both ways, by the way. The Iranians have been threatening to activate the Houthis on several occasions, both during the high-tempo combat phase of this and subsequently, and we're never able to do so. Either the Houthis are reluctant to engage in this campaign, or they're driven by internal strife as well. And I think the Iranian regime is too. So the president, unfortunately, is in a make-good situation, and he is making good. It remains to be seen whether that's enough to convince the Iranians to capitulate or at least come to terms.
Yeah, he's clearly tried diplomacy many times and says he would much rather go that route if it's possible. I think it remains to be seen if it is possible with this regime, which seems hell-bent on having control of the Strait. It seems now equally important to them as the nuclear program has in the past as well. Just quickly look at this map, Middle East trade choke points. There are several areas, obviously the Suez Canal. You've got 12 to 15% of global trade that goes through there. A good chunk of LNG, which we do a lot of, we make a lot of here in the U.S., goes through that route. And then you have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is between Yemen and Djibouti. So, Noah, your thoughts on whether or not, what history tells us about whether or not, and you just touched on this, but elaborate on it a bit more if you would.
Yeah, so the Strait of Hormuz as a choke point, as an instrument of utility in Iranian statecraft, gets less and less valuable the longer it leans into this strategy. Capital seeks the path of least resistance. It's already flying to projects designed to reroute again around the strait, and that just takes influence out of Iran's hands. Secondly, as you said, Bab el-Mandeb Strait, right next to the Horn of Africa, that is continually threatened by both the Houthis and Somali piracy. This is priced in, by the way, to insurance companies that finance those trips, finance trips through the Straits of Malacca. These are financial instruments can account for the level of threat that I think will probably persist in the Strait of Hormuz even after it is cleared, if the United States successfully clears it of this threat. But that takes it out of Iran's hands.
Indeed. Let's hope they can keep building those pipelines and make a lot of these areas obsolete to transit, which they're already working on. It'd probably take a year or so to put a lot of these pipelines into action and kind of loosen Iran's reign over this area. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Lieutenant Darin Gaub, thank you very much. Noah, always good to see you. Noah Rothman, thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.